Welcome to our channel. Enjoy our story and don't forget to subscribe.
The cold hit me first. Not the kind of cold you feel when you forget your jacket, the kind that goes straight through your clothes and settles in your bones, wrapping around your ribs like iron bands. I stood in the parking lot of some forgotten rest stop somewhere in British Columbia, watching the taillights of our SUV disappear down the highway. Brad's laughter still echoed in my ears, mixing with the howls from his buddies Mike and Terry. The sound carried on the wind, even after they'd vanished from sight. "Good luck getting home, Sarah." They'd driven off 30 minutes ago, maybe 40. I'd lost track of time standing there, my arms wrapped around myself, watching the spot where the highway curved and swallowed them whole. I kept thinking they'd come back. Any second now, Brad would pull up, sheepish, maybe a little drunk, apologizing for taking the joke too far. That's what I told myself as the sun dropped lower and the temperature followed, as the sky bled from blue to purple to that terrible gray that comes before dark. I had nothing. No phone. Brad had convinced me to leave it in the glove compartment because we were unplugging for the weekend, because you're always on that damn thing. Because can't you just be present for once? No wallet. It was in the car, too, tucked in my purse on the floor of the back seat, because why would I need it when Brad was paying for everything? Why would I need independence when I had a husband? I had the clothes on my back, jeans that were too thin for this weather, a sweater that had seemed warm enough that morning in Seattle, a light jacket that was worse than useless against the Canadian October wind, the kind of jacket you wear when you think you're just going on a weekend camping trip with your husband and his friends, when you think the worst thing you'll face is their stupid jokes and having to cook over a campfire. In my pocket, a few dollars in loose change from the gas station where I'd bought coffee that morning. I could remember the taste of it still, sweet and terrible, the kind of gas station coffee that's been sitting in the pot for hours. I'd smiled at the attendant, said thank you, been polite and pleasant like I always was, like I'd been taught to be, like good wives were supposed to be. That gas station was miles back. We'd stopped there before crossing into Canada, back when I still thought this was just a normal trip. Back when Brad's friends were just being their usual obnoxious selves, and I was doing what I always did, smiling, laughing along, keeping the peace, playing the role of the cool wife who didn't mind the crude jokes, who didn't flinch when they rated women walking by, who pretended not to hear when they complained about their own wives, their own girlfriends, all those nagging women who just didn't understand that boys will be boys. I should have known something was wrong when Terry suggested we stop at this rest area. "Bathroom break," he'd said, though we'd just stopped an hour before. Brad had been too eager to agree, too quick to pull off the highway. When I came out of the restroom, they were already in the car, engine running, all three of them in the front seats like they'd planned it. "Come on, babe, hurry up," Brad had yelled through the open window, and I jogged toward the SUV, confused but not yet afraid, not yet understanding that the punchline was me. That's when Mike leaned out the window, phone pointed at me, filming. That's when I saw Brad's grin, that particular grin he got when he thought he was being clever, when he thought he'd pulled off something hilarious. That's when I knew, in the space of a heartbeat, exactly what was happening. Brad hit the gas before I reached the door. My fingers actually brushed the handle. I stumbled, nearly fell, caught myself with one hand on the cold asphalt. They were already pulling away, already accelerating, already leaving me behind in a cloud of dust and exhaust. "Good luck getting home, Sarah." Brad's voice carried back on the wind, delighted and cruel. "Don't wait up." That was Terry. Mike's laughter high and hysterical, like this was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. And then they were gone. I stood up slowly, brushed the grit off my palm. The skin was scraped but not bleeding. I stared at my hand for a long moment, at the little red marks, and thought about nothing at all. My mind had gone blank, shock settling in like snow. Then I walked back to the restroom and locked myself in a stall and finally let myself understand what had just happened. My husband had abandoned me in a foreign country, hundreds of miles from home, with no money and no way to contact anyone. My husband and his friends had planned this. They'd talked about it, laughed about it, decided together that this would be funny. They'd driven away filming me, probably already uploading it somewhere, probably already sharing it with other friends, probably already turning my terror into entertainment. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I just sat there on the toilet in that freezing restroom that smelled like bleach and something worse, and I felt something inside me crack and reform into something different, something harder. When I came out, the sun was lower. The parking lot was still empty. I walked to the edge of the pavement and looked down the highway in the direction they'd gone, and I realized something that made me colder than the wind. I wasn't surprised. Hurt, yes. Shocked by the scope of it, maybe. But not surprised. This was just the worst thing Brad had ever done to me. Not the first thing. Not even close. There was the time he'd told everyone at his office Christmas party about my miscarriage, turning it into a punchline about my faulty equipment, laughing while I stood there with a glass of wine turning to poison in my stomach. The time he'd hidden my car keys the morning of my mother's funeral because he thought I was being dramatic about needing to go, because his mother had died years ago and he'd been fine, because I was always too emotional, always too sensitive, always too much. The time he'd given his friends a key to our house and they'd shown up at 3 a.m, drunk and loud, and when I asked them to leave, he'd called me a bitch in front of them and told me to go sleep in the guest room if I didn't like it. The time he'd convinced his friends to show up at my book club and mock us, filming our reactions, posting it online with captions about wine moms and lonely housewives. I'd stopped going to book club after that, stopped seeing those friends. It was easier than explaining, easier than admitting that my husband enjoyed humiliating me. I'd forgiven all of it, made excuses, told myself he didn't mean it, that his friends brought out the worst in him, that marriage meant working through things, that for better or worse meant exactly that. There would be worse times, and this was just one of them. And if I could just be patient, just be understanding, just be better somehow, things would improve. Standing in that parking lot, abandoned and alone, and hundreds of miles from anything familiar, I understood something with perfect clarity. I was done forgiving. I was done understanding. I was done being patient with a man who treated me like a punchline. The temperature dropped as the sun sank lower. I started shivering. My teeth actually chattered, which I'd always thought was just something that happened in books. But no, it was real. It was happening to me. I wrapped my arms around myself and tried to think practically. I had a few dollars. This rest stop had vending machines. I could get something to eat, something to drink. I could stay warm in the restroom until morning. Then I could figure out what to do next. But even as I thought it, I knew it was a fantasy. The restroom was already cold enough to see my breath. Staying there overnight would be dangerous, maybe fatal. I needed help. I needed to swallow my pride and my fear and ask a stranger for help and hope that the stranger was kinder than my husband. A truck pulled into the rest stop as full dark settled in, its headlights sweeping across me like searchlights. I stepped back instinctively, suddenly aware of how vulnerable I was. A woman alone at a rest stop after dark. No phone, no money, no way to call for help if this went wrong. Everything my mother had ever warned me about strangers suddenly felt very real and very present. The truck's engine cut off, the headlights died. A door opened and someone climbed out, a dark shape against the darker sky. You okay?" The voice was rough, deepened by years of smoking or shouting or just living, but not unkind. I looked up at a man maybe 15 years older than me, weathered face creased with lines around his eyes and mouth, wearing a flannel shirt and work boots and an expression of genuine concern. "I'm fine," I lied automatically, because that's what you say, because admitting you're not fine to a stranger in the dark is dangerous, because I'd spent decades learning to make myself smaller, safer, less troublesome. He glanced around the empty parking lot at the dark restroom building, at me standing there shivering in my inadequate jacket, and then back at my face. "No car?" "It left." My voice cracked on the last word. I cleared my throat. "It left without me." Something in my tone must have told the whole story, or enough of it, because he didn't ask the obvious questions. Didn't ask how a car could leave without someone, didn't ask why I hadn't gone with it, didn't ask any of the things that would have forced me to explain the inexplicable. He just nodded slowly, processing this information with the air of someone who'd seen enough of life's cruelties to know they came in all shapes. "You got somewhere to go?" "Seattle." It came out smaller than I meant it to. Came out sounding like a plea instead of a statement. "That's a fair distance from here." He studied me for a moment, and I tried not to flinch under his gaze, tried not to look as desperate as I felt. "There's a diner about 15 miles up the road. Ruby's place. Lady who runs it is my cousin. She might have work if you need it, and there's a room above the diner she rents out cheap. Not much, but it's clean and warm." "I don't have any money." The admission felt like swallowing glass. "Didn't ask if you did." He pulled out his wallet, leather-worn soft with age, and handed me a couple of bills. When I hesitated, staring at the money like it might disappear, he added, "Consider it a loan. Pay it back when you can, or don't. Either way, you look like you could use a hot meal and a night indoors." I should have said no. Every warning I'd ever been given about strangers flashed through my mind. Don't get in cars with people you don't know. Don't trust men who offer help with nothing asked in return. Don't be stupid, Sarah. Don't be naive. Don't be the kind of woman who ends up as a cautionary tale. But I looked at those bills, then at this stranger who'd shown me more kindness in minutes than my husband had in the last couple of years, and I made a choice. Maybe it was the wrong choice. Maybe I'd regret it. Maybe this was how stupid, naive women ended up on the news. Or maybe, just maybe, kindness was real sometimes. "Could you give me a ride there?" That's why I offered. He walked back toward his truck, assuming I'd follow, not looking back to check. "I'm James, by the way." "Sarah." I climbed into the passenger seat, hyper-aware of every choice I was making, every point of no return I was crossing. The door closed with a solid thunk. I was enclosed now, trapped if this went badly, safe if it didn't. "Well, Sarah, let's get you somewhere warm." The truck smelled like coffee and sawdust and old cigarettes. James turned up the heat. Without asking, and I held my hands in front of the vents, watching my fingers turn red as the blood rushed back into them. The burn of returning warmth was almost painful, but I welcomed it. Pain meant I was alive. Pain meant I was still here, still fighting, still surviving. "Thank you," I said, and my voice broke completely this time. And then the tears came. Sudden and overwhelming, and I turned my face toward the window so he wouldn't see me crying. He didn't say anything, just reached across and pulled a box of tissues from the glove compartment, set them on the seat between us, and pulled back onto the highway heading north, away from Seattle, away from my husband, away from everything that had been my life. We drove through darkness, the truck's headlights cutting tunnels through the night. I cried silently, wiping my face with tissue after tissue, watching unfamiliar landscape blur past. Forests I didn't know the names of, towns I'd never heard of, a whole world that existed without any reference to me, to Brad, to the life I'd been living like it was the only possible life. "Ruby's good people," James said finally, his voice quiet and careful. "She won't ask questions you don't want to answer. But if you need help with anything, paperwork, documentation, whatever, she knows people. Helped her own daughter get away from a bad situation once. She understands." I understood what he was really saying. He'd seen this before. Not this exactly, not a woman abandoned at a rest stop, but some version of this. Some woman who needed help and couldn't explain why. Some woman who was running from something. "I'm not running," I said, and then realized it was true. I was thrown away. James looked at me then, just a glance before his eyes went back to the road, but in that glance I saw understanding and something that might have been anger on my behalf, which was strange because we'd only just met. "Then I guess you've got nothing to run back to," he said. "Might as well move forward." The diner appeared like a beacon when we crested a hill, its neon sign cutting through the darkness. Ruby's Place. The apostrophe in the sign was burned out, so it read, Ruby's Place, which seemed right somehow. It was small. The kind of building that looked like it had been there forever and would be there forever more, outlasting everything and everyone. Warm light spilled from the windows. Through the glass, I could see people inside. A trucker at the counter, a couple in a booth, an older man reading a newspaper, all of them eating, talking, living their ordinary lives without any idea that mine had just ended. Or maybe it had just begun. I couldn't tell yet. James parked and killed the engine. The sudden silence was enormous. "You sure about this?" I wasn't sure about anything. My whole life had been upended in the space of an afternoon. I was in a foreign country with a handful of dollars and no plan, and nothing waiting for me except the kindness of strangers. But I opened the door anyway, because what else was I going to do? Go back to that rest stop and wait for a husband who wasn't coming. The diner's warmth hit me when we walked in, along with the smell of coffee and frying bacon and pie. It smelled like every diner I'd ever been in, familiar and comforting and utterly ordinary. A bell chimed above the door. Heads turned to look at us, then turned back to their meals with the studied disinterest of people who minded their own business. Behind the counter stood a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that seemed to see everything. She looked up when we entered, and her gaze moved from James to me and back again. One eyebrow lifted slightly. "James, didn't expect you tonight." "Hey, Ruby," he gestured to me. "This is Sarah. She needs work and a place to stay for a while. Thought you might be able to help." Ruby's eyes settled on me, taking in my tear-stained face. My inadequate jacket, the way I was still shivering even in the diner's warmth. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture softened. "Can you wait tables?" "I can learn." My voice was steady now. That surprised me. "Good enough. Room's $100 a week, but you can work it off until you get on your feet. Meals included. Breakfast shift starts at 5. She pulled a key from somewhere behind the counter. Old brass, worn, smooth. "You start tomorrow. Tonight, you eat something and get some sleep. You look half dead." Just like that, I had a job, a home, a future that didn't include Brad or his friends, or any of the life I'd left behind. It should have felt terrifying, and it did. But underneath the terror was something else, something that felt almost like relief. Ruby led me upstairs to a small room that smelled like lavender and old wood. There was a bed with a faded quilt, a dresser with a cracked mirror, a window that looked out over the highway. She showed me the Bathroom down the hall, gave me a towel, told me to come down whenever I was ready, and she'd make me dinner. "Thank you," I said, and meant it with my whole heart. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't worked a breakfast shift." But she smiled when she said it, and I thought maybe I'd be okay here. That night, lying in the small bed under the faded quilt, I heard my phone ringing in my mind. I imagined Brad calling, frantic now, the joke having gone too far, sorry in that way he sometimes was after he'd been particularly cruel. I imagined the messages piling up, the voicemails full of apologies and explanations. I imagined him realizing what he'd done, realizing he'd lost me, realizing that some things couldn't be forgiven. But my phone was in the glove compartment of his SUV, probably dead by now, probably forgotten. And I was here, in this small room above a diner in a town whose name I didn't even know. And for the first time in years, maybe the first time in my entire marriage, I fell asleep without that tight knot of anxiety in my chest, without wondering what mood Brad would be in when he got home, without bracing myself for the next hurt. I slept like the dead and woke to darkness and the sound of movement downstairs. 4:30 in the morning. Time to start my new life. The breakfast shift at Ruby's place started in darkness and didn't slow down until nearly noon. I learned this within my first week. I learned a lot of things in that first week. How to carry multiple plates at once without dropping them. How to remember who ordered what without writing it down. How to smile at tired truckers who just wanted their coffee hot and their eggs over easy. How to pour coffee with one hand while clearing a table with the other. How to make small talk that felt genuine even when I was exhausted. But mostly, I learned how to be invisible in plain sight. How to listen to the regulars talk about their lives without revealing anything about mine. How to deflect. Questions with a smile and a change of subject. How to exist in a space without taking up too much of it, which was something I'd perfected over years of marriage, but now served a different purpose. Ruby never asked where I came from or why I was here. Neither did James, who showed up every morning at the same time like clockwork, ordered the same breakfast, scrambled eggs, bacon, wheat toast, black coffee, and sat in the same booth by the window. He'd nod at me when I brought his food, leave a generous tip folded under his coffee cup, and disappear until the next morning. On my fourth day, he broke the pattern. "You settling in okay?" he asked as I refilled his coffee. "As okay as I can be." I kept my voice neutral, professional. Ruby's been kind. She's good at that. He took a sip of coffee, studying me over the rim of the cup. "You thought about what comes next?" "Next?" I almost laughed. "I'm trying to figure out what comes now." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough, but when you're ready to think about later, you should know. You can't stay invisible forever. Eventually, you'll need documentation, a bank account, health insurance, all the things that prove you exist." "I exist," I said, maybe too sharply. "I know you do, but the government doesn't. Not up here." He pulled a business card from his wallet, slid it across the table. "Friend of mine. Immigration lawyer. She helps people in complicated situations. Helped Ruby's daughter years back when she needed to disappear from someone. No judgment, just help." I stared at the card. Patricia Chen, attorney at law, a Vancouver phone number. I can't afford a lawyer. She does some work pro bono, and Ruby's word carries weight. He stood, dropped bills on the table even though his breakfast cost much less. Think about it. No pressure. He left before I could respond. I slipped the card into my apron pocket and went back to work, but my mind kept circling back to that word. Disappear. Was that what I was doing? Disappearing? Or was I finally appearing after years of being erased by Brad's casual cruelties? Weeks became a month. A month became longer. The mountain landscape that had seemed so alien at first began to feel familiar. I learned the names of the regulars, Frank the trucker who always ordered apple pie for breakfast, Dolores, who came in every Tuesday for lunch and left Christian pamphlets as tips, old George, who sat at the counter and read newspapers cover to cover. I learned the rhythm of the place, when it would be busy, when it would be dead. I learned Ruby's tells, how she hummed when she was content, how she went quiet when she was worried. And I learned that grief doesn't come all at once. It comes in waves. I'd be fine for hours, focused on work, on survival, and then I'd see a couple laughing together or hear a song on the diner's old jukebox, and suddenly I'd be drowning in the loss of everything I'd thought my life would be. Not the loss of Brad. That felt more like liberation with each passing day, but the loss of who I'd thought I was, the loss of the future I'd imagined, the loss of the person I'd been before I learned to make myself smaller. On a gray Tuesday morning in November, Ruby found me crying in the walk-in freezer. I'd gone in to get more bacon and just stopped. Stood there among the hanging meat and frozen vegetables and let it all pour out. She didn't say anything, just handed me a clean apron and waited until I pulled myself together. "Sorry," I managed finally. "I don't know what." "You're grieving," Ruby said simply. "Doesn't matter that what you lost wasn't good for you. It was still yours, and now it's gone. That deserves tears." I shouldn't be sad. I should be relieved. He was awful to me. "You can be both." She adjusted the hairnet she always wore in the kitchen. "My daughter, the one James mentioned. She cried for months after she left her husband. Cried even though he'd put her in the hospital twice. Cried even though leaving probably saved her life. The heart's stupid like that. It mourns what it's used to, even when what it's used to is poison." What happened to her? She rebuilt. Slower than she wanted, messier than she hoped. But she rebuilt, got her nursing degree, married a good man, has a couple of kids now. Ruby's expression softened. "Takes time, though, and you've got to let yourself feel it, all of it. The anger, the grief, the fear, the relief. You bottle it up, it'll eat you alive." That night, I used the diner's computer to search for myself. Found our wedding announcement from years ago, smiling photos of Brad and me looking happy and young and stupid. Found my old Facebook page, which I hadn't updated in over a year because Brad had convinced me social media was toxic and I should delete it. Found nothing about my disappearance. No missing person reports, no desperate pleas for information, nothing. What I did find was Brad's page, public and active. Photos from the camping trip, including one of the three of them at a bar that night celebrating. The caption, "Epic weekend with the boys. Sometimes the best adventures are the unplanned ones. Hashtag bro time, hashtag freedom." The comments were full of laughing emojis and looks like fun and wish I'd been there. Not one person asked where I was. Not one person seemed to notice I was missing from a trip I'd supposedly been on. I clicked through to Mike's page, found the video. They'd actually posted it. Hundreds of views, comments full of people calling it savage and hilarious and "your wife's gonna kill you, LOL." I watched myself in that video, watched myself realize what was happening, watched the confusion and hurt and disbelief cross my face as they drove away, watched myself become entertainment for strangers. The rage hit me so hard I had to close the laptop before I put my fist through the screen. I went downstairs and out the back door of the diner into the cold November night and screamed into the darkness until my throat was raw. Screamed until there were no more screams left. Then I sat down on the back steps and cried until I was empty. When I went back inside, Ruby was waiting with hot tea and pie. "Saw it?" she asked. "How did you—" "Figured you'd look eventually. Most people do." She set the tea in front of me. "What are you going to do about it?" "What can I do?" "Well, you can go back. Face him. Try to make him understand what he did." She paused. "Or you can lawyer up and make his life very difficult from a distance. Or you can let it go and build something new here. Your choice. No wrong answer, long as you're the one choosing. I thought about that video, about Brad's casual cruelty, about years of humiliation and hurt packaged as jokes, about the person I'd been, always apologizing, always accommodating, always trying to be good enough for someone who enjoyed making me feel small. I want a divorce, I said, and I want him to know exactly what it cost him. Ruby smiled. Then you call that lawyer James told you about. I called Patricia Chen the next morning. She took my case within a week. Pro bono, just like James had said, because she believed in helping women escape bad situations, and because Ruby vouched for me, and because, she said, Brad's behavior was so clearly documented online that the case would be straightforward. You're not the first woman whose husband thought abandoning her would be funny, Patricia told me during our first meeting in her Vancouver office. But you might be the first one whose husband was stupid enough to film it and post it publicly. That video is going to make this very easy. The divorce proceedings started in December. Patricia filed in Washington State, where we'd been married, and had Brad served at his office. According to her, he'd been shocked, claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that he'd come back to get me and I was gone, that I was overreacting. He's trying to say he came back an hour later and you'd already left, Patricia told me over the phone. Says you abandoned him. The laugh that came out of me was sharp and bitter. He has a video of him driving away from me. I know. His lawyer's trying to claim it was a prank that went wrong, that he intended to come back. He didn't come back for months. I know that too. Don't worry. We have evidence. Phone records showing he didn't try to contact you. Social media posts showing he wasn't concerned. That video. We'll be fine. But the process was slow. Paperwork and waiting and more paperwork. Meanwhile, winter settled into the mountains. Snow came, deep and heavy. The diner got quieter. Some days we'd only have a handful of customers. Ruby taught me to bake during the slow periods. Pies, bread, cookies. I learned the meditation of kneading dough, the precision of measuring flour, the satisfaction of pulling something golden and perfect from the oven. James still came every morning. We started talking more. Nothing deep at first, just small exchanges. He worked in construction, I learned. Specialized in custom furniture. Had a workshop a few miles from the diner where he built tables and cabinets and bookshelves for people who wanted something that would last. You ever think about doing something else? I asked him one morning in January when the diner was empty except for us. Like what? I don't know. Something bigger. Something famous. He considered this, sipping his coffee. I build things people use every day. Tables where families eat dinner. Shelves that hold their books and photos. Things that'll outlast me. That feels big enough. There was something peaceful in that philosophy, something solid. Brad had always been chasing the next promotion, the next achievement, the next thing that would prove he was important, always comparing himself to others, always keeping score. James just built tables and seemed content with it. That sounds nice, I said quietly. What about you? You planning to stay in the service industry? I don't know what I'm planning. It was the truth. Right now, I'm just trying to make it through each day. That's enough, he said. For now, that's enough. In February, Patricia called with news. Brad was contesting the divorce, claiming I'd abandoned him, that I owed him for the wedding expenses, that I'd taken his truck, the truck that had abandoned me. He's grasping at straws, Patricia said. His lawyer knows they don't have a case, but he's going to drag this out as long as he can. Make it expensive, make it difficult, punishment for leaving. How long? Could be months, could be a year. Depends on how stubborn he wants to be. A year. I could be tied to Brad for another year, legally if not physically. The thought made me want to scream. But I had Ruby's diner. I had the small room upstairs that had become home. I had Patricia fighting for me. I had James's quiet morning presence. I had something resembling a life, even if it wasn't the life I'd imagined. Spring came slowly to the mountains. Snow melted. The highway got busier. More truckers, more tourists, more people passing through on their way to somewhere else. The diner filled up again. I worked longer hours, saved more money, started to feel like maybe I could breathe without it hurting. One morning in April, James came in and sat at the counter instead of his usual booth. "Need to ask you something," he said when I brought his coffee. "Okay." I waited, suddenly nervous for reasons I couldn't name. "There's a craft fair next month, up in Whistler. I'm showing some furniture pieces. Thought maybe you'd want to come along, see something besides this stretch of highway." It wasn't quite asking me on a date, but it wasn't not asking me on a date either. "I'm still married," I said. "Technically?" "I know." He looked at me steadily. "I'm not asking you to be anything. You're not ready to be. Just thought you might like a day away from here. No pressure." I thought about it. About Brad, still legally my husband, still fighting to make my life difficult from hundreds of miles away. About the life I'd had, the one where I'd shrunk myself small to fit into someone else's expectations. About the life I was building now, slowly, one day at a time. "Okay," I said. "I'd like that." His smile was small but genuine. "Good, it's a date." Then, seeing my expression, "Or not a date, whatever you want it to be." "A day away," I said firmly. "Just a day away." But when the day came and we drove up into the mountains together, talking easily about nothing important, stopping at a roadside stand for fresh strawberries, laughing at James's terrible jokes, I felt something shift inside me. Not love. It was too soon for that, maybe too soon forever. But possibility. The possibility that someday I might be ready to trust someone again. The possibility that someday the word date wouldn't make me flinch. The possibility that I was more than Brad's punchline, more than his victim, more than the sum of the hurts I'd survived. We spent the day at the craft fair. I watched James talk to customers about his furniture, watched the pride in his face when someone ran their hand over a table he'd built and nodded with appreciation. Watched him be good at something without needing to prove he was better than anyone else, without needing applause or recognition or validation from strangers. On the drive back, he asked, "You ever going to tell me what really happened at that rest stop?" I'd been expecting this question for months. My husband and his friends thought it would be funny to abandon me there, drive away and leave me stranded, film it, make it into entertainment. James's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Jesus. Yeah. I watched the landscape blur past. I'd forgiven smaller versions of that for years. That was just the biggest one. The one I couldn't forgive. "Good," he said quietly. "You shouldn't have forgiven any of them. I know that now." We drove in silence for a while. Then James said, "For what it's worth, I'm glad I stopped at that rest stop that night. Glad I met you. Even though I'm a mess? You're not a mess. You're rebuilding. That's different." He glanced at me. "Takes courage to rebuild. Most people just stay broken." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. Just watched the mountains pass by and thought about courage and rebuilding and the strange way life could fall apart and come together at the same time. When we got back to the diner, Ruby was waiting with a message. Patricia had called. Brad had signed the divorce papers. After months of fighting, he'd finally given up. We were done. Legally, officially, finally done. I walked outside and called Patricia from the payphone by the highway. "What changed his mind?" I asked. "He met someone," Patricia said, and I could hear the amusement in her voice. Wants to move on with his life. Doesn't want to be tied to you anymore. The irony was so perfect it made me laugh. After all that, after fighting for months, he met someone. Men like him always do. They need someone to control, someone to make them feel important. When you disappeared, he lost that. Now he's found a replacement. Poor girl. I sent her a message, Patricia said, anonymously, with a link to that video. What she does with it is up to her. I thought about that for a moment, thought about the woman who would be walking into the same trap I'd escaped. Then I thought about how she'd been warned, how she had information I'd never had, how her choices were her own. Thank you, I said, for everything. You're welcome. The decree will be final in 90 days. After that, you're free. Free. The word felt strange and new and absolutely right. I went back inside the diner. James was still there, sitting at the counter, drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. Ruby was cleaning the grill. Everything looked exactly the same as it had this morning, but everything was different. Papers are signed, I told them. Ruby came around the counter and hugged me. Actually hugged me, which she'd never done before. Good, she said fiercely. Now you can really start over. James just nodded, but there was something in his eyes that made my heart beat faster, something that looked like hope. That night, I lay in my small room and thought about the past months, about the woman I'd been when I arrived here, broken and scared and abandoned, about the woman I was becoming, stronger maybe, braver, more myself than I'd been in years. I thought about Brad finding someone new and realized I didn't care, didn't feel jealous or hurt or anything except a vague sense of pity for whoever she was. I thought about James and the way he'd looked at me today, thought about the possibility of something new, something healthy, something built on respect instead of control. But mostly I thought about myself, about who I wanted to be, about what came next. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I fell asleep smiling. 5 years is enough time to become someone else entirely. Enough time to forget the shape of your old life, the weight of old hurts. Enough time to build something solid and real from nothing but determination and the kindness of strangers who became family. I was 32 when Brad abandoned me. I was 37 when he found me again. By then, I'd become Ruby's business partner. She decided to retire at 68, and instead of selling the diner to some corporation that would gut it and turn it into another identical roadside stop, she'd sold it to me. Well, sold is generous. She'd given me terms so reasonable they bordered on charity, payments I could actually afford from the diner's modest profits. Place needs someone who gives a damn, she'd said when she offered. Someone who knows what it means to find home when you thought you'd lost everything. I'd changed the name to the Second Chance Cafe, which Ruby said was too on the nose but secretly loved. I'd expanded the menu, hired a couple more waitresses, started serving dinner on weekends, added local art to the walls, paintings and photographs from artists in the surrounding towns, pieces I rotated every season. The place had become more than a diner. It had become a gathering spot, a community center, a place where people knew they'd be welcomed and fed and treated with dignity. James had expanded too. His furniture business had grown from a one-man operation in a garage to a proper workshop with a pair of employees. His pieces were in homes across British Columbia now, beautiful functional art that people passed down through generations. He'd built everything in our apartment above the diner, the bed frame, the kitchen table, the bookshelves that lined every wall, each piece made with his hands, made to last, made with the quiet patience that defined everything he did. We'd been married for a couple of years. a small ceremony at the courthouse in Vancouver with Ruby and Patricia Chen as witnesses, followed by dinner at a restaurant overlooking the water. Nothing fancy, nothing performative, just real and simple in hours. I'd taken his last name, Morrison, instead of Cooper, and the paperwork to make it official had felt like magic. Sarah Morrison. A new name for a new person. The woman I'd become had almost nothing in common with Sarah Cooper except a shared history of survival. I'd learned to be happy, not the performed happiness I'd practiced during my marriage to Brad, the smile and endure happiness that was really just fear wearing a pleasant mask, real happiness. The kind that came from waking up next to someone who treated you with respect, from running a business you'd built with your own hands, from knowing that the life you had was exactly the life you'd chosen. The gray had started threading through my hair around age 35. I'd let it grow, didn't bother coloring it. Let it silver at my temples, let the lines deepen around my eyes and mouth. Earned every one of them. James said I looked more beautiful now than in the photos Ruby had taken of me years ago when I'd first arrived. Hollow-eyed and brittle and held together by willpower alone. "You look alive now," he'd said. "Before, you looked like you were disappearing even while you were standing right there." He was right. I'd spent so many years making myself smaller, quieter, less troublesome. Now I took up space, spoke my mind, laughed loud when something was funny, got angry when something was wrong, existed fully instead of apologetically. I thought about Brad sometimes, but rarely. He'd become like a character from a book I'd read long ago, someone I remembered intellectually but couldn't quite connect to, emotionally. The hurt had faded. The anger had transformed into something more useful, fuel for building something better. The afternoon Brad walked into my diner, I was laughing at something Frank had said about his latest cross-country haul. It was a Thursday in September, warm and golden, the kind of day that made you grateful to be alive. The diner was moderately busy, lunch rush winding down, a few truckers at the counter, a family in one of the booths. The bell above the door chimed. I looked up from pouring Frank's coffee, smile still on my face, ready to greet another customer. And there was Brad. I knew him immediately, even though 5 years had aged him in ways I hadn't expected. His hairline had receded. He'd gained weight, not much, but enough to soften his jawline, strain the buttons on his shirt. Lines bracketed his mouth, carved themselves between his eyebrows. He looked tired. He looked older than his age should allow. He looked like someone who'd lived 5 hard years. Our eyes met across the diner. I watched recognition hit him, watched his expression cycle through disbelief, shock, confusion. Watched him take in my appearance, the wedding ring on my finger, the confidence in how I stood. I watched him try to reconcile the woman in front of him with the woman he'd abandoned. I set down the coffee pot with deliberate care. My hands were steady. My heart was pounding, but my breathing stayed even. Years of therapy. Patricia had connected me with a counselor in Vancouver, someone who specialized in helping women recover from abusive relationships, had taught me how to manage panic, how to stay present, how to remember I was safe now. "Hello, Brad." My voice came out calm, almost pleasant, like he was any other customer, anyone else walking through that door. He flinched at his name, took a step forward, then stopped like he'd hit an invisible wall. "Sarah. Jesus Christ, Sarah. I've looked everywhere for you." "Have you?" It wasn't a question. I picked up the coffee pot again, topped off Frank's cup with steady hands. Frank was watching Brad with the narrow-eyed suspicion of someone who'd heard my story, who knew exactly who this stranger had to be. "I've been trying to find you for years." Brad's voice cracked. He looked around the diner like he still couldn't believe where he'd found me. Years, Sarah. You just vanished. No trace. No forwarding address. Your phone disconnected. You weren't with your family. Did you check with them right away? I interrupted. Or did it take you a while to realize I wasn't coming back? He had the grace to look ashamed. I tried to find you. After I realized you were serious, that you weren't just trying to scare me. Scare you. I let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it had contained any humor. I didn't do anything to scare you, Brad. You abandoned me. Hundreds of miles from home. No money, no phone, no way to contact anyone. You filmed it. You posted it online. You made me into entertainment. It was a joke. The words came out automatic, defensive. Then he seemed to hear himself, seemed to realize how inadequate that defense was. It was a stupid joke. I came back for you months later. An hour later, he insisted. I came back an hour later and you were gone. I looked everywhere. I called. He stopped. Your phone was in the car. I know where my phone was. I thought you'd found a ride. Gone to the police, maybe. I thought you'd be angry, but we'd work it out. He took another step toward me. Several customers were openly staring now. I never meant for you to disappear. Well, I did. I met his eyes steadily. I disappeared, and then I built a new life, a better one. He looked around the diner again, taking in the art on the walls, the full tables, the warm lighting. This is yours? Yes. You own this place? I own this place. Something complicated crossed his face. Surprise, maybe, or resentment that I'd managed fine without him. I'm glad you're okay. I worried. Don't. The word came out sharp. Don't pretend you worried about me. You posted that video. You laughed about it. You celebrated. I saw the photos, Brad. You and Mike and Terry at the bar that night celebrating what you'd done to me. He went pale. You saw that? I saw everything. Every comment, every laugh, every person who thought destroying me was hilarious. I crossed my arms. So no, you don't get to act like you were concerned. You were relieved. Probably thought I'd come crawling back eventually, apologizing for overreacting. That's not... He stopped, ran a hand through his thinning hair. Okay, you're right. I was an asshole. I was cruel. What I did was unforgivable. I know that now. Good for you. I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm genuinely, truly sorry. I've changed. I'm not that person anymore. Neither am I. I gestured at the diner, at myself. This is who I am now. This is my life. You're not part of it. I know. I'm not asking... He swallowed hard. I'm not asking to be part of it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking you to listen to me. I needed to see you, to know you were okay, to tell you I'm sorry. The door opened. James walked in, coming from his workshop for his afternoon coffee like he did every day around mid-afternoon. He was wearing sawdust like cologne, had wood shavings in his hair, looked exactly like himself, solid and real and utterly unbothered by the drama unfolding in his wife's diner. He took in the scene immediately, me standing rigid behind the counter, Brad hovering near the door looking desperate and lost, every customer in the place pretending not to watch while absolutely watching. James walked straight to me, kissed my temple, and said quietly, "You okay?" "I'm fine." And I was. I was absolutely fine. Better than fine. I was standing in my own diner with my husband beside me facing the man who'd tried to destroy me, and I was fine, steady, strong, complete. Brad was staring at James, at the easy way he touched me, the wedding ring on his finger that matched mine, the implicit claim and comfort in that simple gesture. "This is James," I said. "My husband. James, this is Brad. We were married once, a long time ago." "The rest stop," James said flatly. "The rest stop," I confirmed. James looked at Brad for a long moment. Brad looked back, and something passed between them. Some masculine sizing up that I didn't have the patience for. Then James turned back to me, dismissing Brad completely. "Coffee when you get a chance," he said. "No rush." He sat at his usual spot at the counter, pulled out his phone and started scrolling, completely relaxed, utterly unconcerned. His presence said everything that needed saying. "I'm here. You're safe. This man is nothing." Brad watched this exchange with something like desperation on his face. Was he the one who helped you that night? Yes. And now you're married to him? Yes. Jesus Christ, Sarah, you built an entire new life, new name, new business, new husband. You erased me completely. I didn't erase you, I said quietly. I erased the version of myself that would tolerate you. That hit him. I watched it land, watched him process it, watched something in his expression crumble. I deserve that, he said finally. I deserve all of this. I deserve for you to hate me. I don't hate you. And it was true. I felt nothing for him except a distant pity, the way you might feel sorry for a stranger who'd made terrible choices. I don't think about you enough to hate you. That's worse. He tried to smile, but it came out broken. That's so much worse than hate. We stood there in silence for a moment. Around us, the diner had gone quiet. Even Frank had stopped eating, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. "Why did you really come looking for me?" I asked. "After years? After all this time?" Brad's shoulders sagged. "I got divorced. Recently. She left me. Said I was..." He stopped, laughed bitterly. "Said I was controlling. Said I made her feel small. Said she couldn't live like that anymore." There it was, the real reason. He hadn't come looking for me out of guilt or concern or genuine remorse. He'd come because someone had done to him what he'd done to me, abandoned him, chosen to leave rather than endure him, and he wanted to understand why. "And you thought finding me would give you answers," I said. "I thought maybe if I could explain, if I could make you understand that I'm sorry, that I've changed." "You haven't changed." I said it gently but firmly. "You just got a taste of what it feels like to be discarded. That's not the same as changing. That's just finally understanding what you did to someone else. That's not fair." "Fair?" The word came out harder than I intended. "You want to talk about fair, Brad? You abandoned me in a foreign country with no money, no phone, no way to get home. You filmed it, you laughed about it, you made me into a joke. And then you fought the divorce for months, dragged it out, made it as difficult and expensive and painful as you possibly could. You don't get to talk to me about fair." He flinched like I'd slapped him. "I was angry. I was hurt that you left. I didn't leave. You threw me away. There's a difference." James cleared his throat quietly, not interrupting, just reminding me he was there, reminding me I didn't have to do this, didn't owe Brad anything, could end this conversation any time I wanted. I took a breath, let it out slowly, found my center the way my therapist had taught me. "Brad, I don't know what you want from me. Absolution, forgiveness, some kind of closure that will make you feel better about what you did. I can't give you that. I won't give you that. What you did to me was cruel and calculated and deliberately humiliating. You don't get to feel better about it just because you're sorry now." I know that. He looked at me with something that might have been genuine anguish. "I just need to know you're okay, that you're happy, that I didn't break you." "You didn't break me." I said it clearly, firmly, making sure he heard it, making sure everyone in the diner heard it. "You broke us. You broke the marriage. But you didn't break me. I rebuilt myself. I rebuilt my life. I found people who treat me with respect and kindness and love. I found work that matters to me. I found home. You didn't break me, Brad. You freed me. Something in his face crumpled completely. He nodded once, sharp and final. Okay, that's good. That's what I needed to hear. He turned toward the door, then stopped, looked back at me one last time. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. I know it doesn't change anything. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am. I believe you, I said, and I did. I believed he was sorry. I also believed it didn't matter. Some things couldn't be fixed with apologies. Some bridges, once burned, should stay burned. Brad left. The bell chimed above the door. Through the window, I watched him walk to a rental car. He'd probably flown into Vancouver, driven out here following whatever digital trail he'd finally uncovered, and sit behind the wheel for a long moment before starting the engine and driving away. The diner stayed quiet for another beat. Then Frank said, "Well, shit." And everyone laughed, and just like that, the tension broke. James came around the counter, put his arms around me, and just held me, not saying anything, just being there. Solid and warm and real. "You okay?" he asked finally. "Yeah." I rested my head against his chest, listened to his heartbeat, steady and sure. "Yeah, I'm okay. Better than okay." He looked like hell. He did. You didn't. I pulled back enough to look up at him. What did I look like? "Strong," James said, simply. "You looked strong." Ruby came through from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She still came by to help out now and then, couldn't quite let go of the place completely, claimed she got bored sitting at home. Mostly I thought she liked keeping an eye on things, making sure I was okay. "That him?" she asked. "That was him." She studied my face for a long moment. Then she nodded, satisfied. "Good. Now you can really put it behind you." And she was right. Brad had existed as unfinished business, a ghost haunting the edges of my new life. Not because I missed him or wanted him back, but because the story had felt incomplete. He'd walked away from me without consequences, without understanding, without ever having to face what he'd done. Now he had. Now he knew. Now he'd seen exactly what he'd lost. Not just me, but the chance at a real partnership with someone who'd loved him once. He'd seen what I'd built without him. He'd seen who I'd become. He'd seen James, who treated me the way Brad never had. And most importantly, he'd seen that I was fine, better than fine, happy, complete, thriving. That night, after the diner closed, James and I sat on the back steps watching the stars come out. The September air was crisp, but not cold yet, carrying the smell of pine and approaching autumn. "You think he'll come back?" James asked. No. I was certain of it. He got what he came for. He wanted to know if he'd destroyed me. He knows now that he didn't. That's enough. What if he tries to? He won't. I leaned against James's shoulder. He's not dangerous, not really. He's just weak. Weak people don't come back for second rounds. They just move on to easier targets. His new ex-wife. Yeah, I wonder if she's okay. You sent her that message through your lawyer. You warned her. That's all you could do. I know. I did know. I'd learned that you couldn't save everyone, couldn't warn them all. Some people had to learn their own lessons, fight their own battles, find their own strength. I just hope she gets out before it costs her too much. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Above us, the stars wheeled across the sky in their ancient patterns. The highway whispered with occasional traffic. From inside the diner came the hum of the refrigerators, the tick of the old clock on the wall. "I'm glad he came," I said finally. "Yeah?" "Yeah, because now I know for sure that I don't need closure from him. I already had it. I had it the day I decided to stay here instead of going back. I had it the day the divorce was final. I had it the day I married you." I turned to look at him. I had it every single day I woke up and chose this life instead of that one. James kissed my forehead. "You're something else, Sarah Morrison." "I am," I agreed. "Took me a while to figure that out, but I am." Months later, Ruby decided to move to Victoria, permanently to be near her daughter and grandchildren. I threw her the send-off she deserved. Half the town showed up, people whose lives she'd touched over decades of running that diner. We laughed and cried and told stories until past midnight, and when she left the next morning, she hugged me fierce and long and whispered, "I'm proud of you, girl. Look what you built from nothing." A year after that, we expanded, bought the property next door, turned it into a proper restaurant for dinner service, while keeping the diner for breakfast and lunch. Hired more staff, started a catering business, became the place where people held their wedding receptions, their anniversary parties, their celebrations of life. The Second Chance Cafe became known for exactly what its name promised: second chances. We hired people who needed work and couldn't get it elsewhere, single mothers getting back on their feet, ex-cons trying to rebuild, addicts in recovery, people who'd been thrown away by life and were trying to rebuild themselves. Some of them stayed, some moved on to bigger things. All of them left knowing that second chances were real, that it was possible to start over, that one bad chapter didn't have to define the entire story. I thought about Brad sometimes, but rarely. And when I did, it was with the distant curiosity you might feel about a stranger's life. I wondered if he'd learned anything, if he'd gotten better or just gotten better at hiding what he was, if he'd found someone who could change him, or if he'd found someone who would tolerate him. Mostly, I didn't wonder at all. Years passed. Brad's visit became a distant memory, another chapter closed. James and I stood in our restaurant one night at closing time, exhausted from a busy Saturday service, and he pulled me into a slow dance even though there was no music playing. "What are we doing?" I asked, laughing. "Celebrating." "Celebrating what?" "This. Us. The fact that you're here." He kissed me, slow and sweet. "The fact that we get to do this." He gestured at the restaurant, at the life we'd built together, every day. And he was right. That was worth celebrating. The small things and the big things and everything in between. The morning coffee and the evening stars and the work that filled the hours between. The difficult customers and the grateful ones and the regulars who became friends. The burned dinners and the perfect meals and the constant steady effort of building something real. I'd been thrown away once. Abandoned and alone and scared and certain that my life was over. But I'd been wrong. My life hadn't ended that day on a rest stop in British Columbia. It had finally, truly, completely begun. And every single day since, I'd been choosing it. Choosing to stay, to build, to grow, to love, to become someone I could be proud of. Choosing second chances for myself and for everyone who walked through my doors looking for the same thing I'd found. That was the real victory. Not that I'd survived what Brad did to me. Not that I'd rebuilt after he destroyed me. Not even that I'd found love again and built a successful business and created a good life. The victory was simpler and more profound than all of that. I'd learned to choose myself, to value myself, to demand the respect and kindness and love I deserved, to walk away from what hurt me and toward what helped me grow. Brad hadn't broken me. He'd just shown me what I would no longer tolerate. And in the end, that was the greatest gift he could have given me, even if he'd never meant it as one. I leaned against James's chest and listened to his heartbeat and looked around at the restaurant we'd built together, and I felt nothing but gratitude for the stranger who'd stopped to help, for the cousin who'd given me work, for the lawyer who'd fought for me, for the man who'd loved me patiently until I was ready to love him back, for all the second chances that had become my life. The highway outside whispered with late-night traffic, people passing through on their way to somewhere else, but I wasn't passing through anymore. I was home, and home was exactly where I'd chosen to be,